Okay, we'll go ahead and get started as people join in. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We have a great panel with different scientists in different industries, different areas that we're so lucky to have with us today. Um, the purpose of today's panel is really having this diverse group of successful scientists in their field to discuss their current positions, their professional journey, and provide most of our postdoctoral fellows and trainees with tips and tricks. Hopefully this will help fellows and trainees learn about alternative academic positions, again, from a diversity of perspectives here we have represented, and learn about other positions outside academia. So I'm going to go ahead and just introduce our panelists just by last name alphabetical order here. First, we have Taylor Bond. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't, Taylor. Joining us. He's an industry nutrition scientist with experiences in both the food and dietary supplement industries, including General Mills and Nature Way. He specializes in reviewing and conducting nutrition research to bring consumer desired benefits to health products. Um, Outside of his main job responsibilities, Taylor also serves as vice chair of the IFNS Cognitive Health Committee and industry chair for the ASN Early Career Network. Taylor received his PhD in nutrition from the Ohio State University in 2018. Um, I'll be sure to make these slides available to attendees, so you can be sure to have everyone's contact information or social media if you want to reach out to them. Next, joining us, we have Michelle Cardell. Dr. Cardell is a nutrition scientist, registered dietitian, and senior director of global clinical research and nutrition at Weight Watchers, and a faculty member at the University of Florida, where she is also an associate director for the Center for Integrative Cardiovascular and Metabolic Diseases. Her research focuses on implementing effective healthy lifestyle interventions, particularly among underserved populations. She's a fellow of the Obesity Society and has published more than 100 papers in high-impact journals, including JAMA Pediatrics, AJCN. Dr. Cadell has won many awards, including University of Alabama Outstanding Woman Award, Academy of Nutrition Dietetics Excellence in Emerging Outcomes Research Award, and UAB's Young Alumni Rising Star Award. She's also a alum of the T32 here at Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Next, we have Dr. Maria Mari Mitrani. She is a physician scientist passionate about regenerative and preventive approaches to help improve patients' quality of life. She is the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Gattaca Genomics. She co-founded and was the chief science officer of Organocell Regenerative Medicine. She co-founded American Stem Cell and Anti-Aging Center and Americell Trinidad, one of the first, sorry if I don't pronounce all of this right, autologous stem cell centers in South America and the Caribbean. She was most recently recognized as one of the top 100 healthcare leaders by IFAH for her work spearheading COVID-19 therapeutics. Dr. Mari is an advocate for minorities, animals, and other issues that require and demand equality. Her passion for nutrition, animal welfare, and environmental advocacy has sponsored one of the top vegan events on 2 years in a row, the Vegan Women's Summit. Last but certainly not least, we have Megan Rubel. Dr. Rubel received a BS in Nutritional Sciences from University of Missouri, a master's in exercise science from the University of Nebraska, and a PhD in clinical and translational sciences from University of Arkansas for medical sciences. She then completed 2 postdocs, one as a NIH T32 funded fellow in reproductive and developmental sciences at Michigan State, and a second one here at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus within the section of pediatric nutrition. Her current position is a research biologist at the USDA ARS Microbiome and Metabolism Research Unit at the Arkansas Children Nutrition Center in Little Rock. Dr. Rubel's primary research interest is centered around the nexus of obesity and offspring health during the preconception and gestation periods, specifically trying to understand how maternal dietary and lifestyle factors during the prenatal period impact offspring health and development. To do this, Dr. Rubel is trying to link maternal diets, lipid metabolism, placental function to the gut microbiome in order to understand how this may impact maternal child health outcomes. So that is all of our panelists. Again, thank you all for attending today. I'm going to go ahead and share the questions that we have generated in advance. I'll share that in the chat. But if each panelist, so starting with you, Taylor, you'll be the first one to go here. If you could tell us about your most recent or current position what does that entail? So what does your day-to-day to look like, or week to week, whatever you want to share? And how did you find and obtain this position? So I'll share these questions again in the chat, but Taylor, if you could go ahead and take it away.
All right. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. So I am a senior scientist at General Mills, and I would say my day-to-day is broken down into two major categories. The first one is leading clinical studies. So we work with academic collaborators or contract research organizations to generate new research for our products. And then probably the second major aspect is instead of generating our own research, we would leverage research from the existing literature to provide claims guidance, substantiation for our brands and our products. So I would say those are the two big responsibilities that I have. I also love that for my job, there is, I don't want to say an expectation, but an opportunity to serve as an external liaison for industry and trade organizations. So IFANs, ASN, those are things I consider as part of my job responsibility as well. And then what was the question? It was, um,
How
is
did
that,
you find and obtain your current
okay,
position, or how did you get there? Like, was this through networking?
yeah.
Yeah.
So since this was my second industry job, I would say it was very easy to obtain because I already had an extensive network and General Mills is local to where I live, which is Minnesota. I will say, however, though, my first industry job was very difficult to obtain because I did not have a network yet. And so that's just something that people need to uh, take into account. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Dr. Cardell, could you please share?
Hey, so my current position, I head up clinical research and nutrition at Weight Watchers. And then I'm still on faculty at University of Florida in the College of Medicine. So I had no life plans to join industry whatsoever. That was not on my radar. I was an assistant professor in the College of Medicine, you know, fully funded NIH lab, et cetera. And when, I don't know if you all remember, but like Weight Watchers released a pediatric program called Curbo that was developed at Stanford, and then Weight Watchers bought it. So it was like an evidence-based program. But like the news cycle around it was like vicious. Like there was New York Times op-eds written by people like Christy Harrison, who are like health at every size folks. She had a new book coming out. So it correlated perfectly with that. And, people started writing me because I did a lot of research in pediatric and adolescent health and healthy lifestyle interventions. And people were writing me because I'm very like active on social media. Like, what do you think? And rather than like writing to each person, I just like basically took a couple screenshots of what I thought like on my screen and I posted it. Well, the editor of a journal saw that posted, asked me to write a commentary for the journal on it. Then the New York Times picked it up. And then the Obesity Society asked me to lead the opening sessions at Obesity Week on a session called treating, like it was like pediatric obesity, treating patients in an era of outrage or something like that. And the whole Weight Watchers team was in the audience because I had written this commentary and I tried to be fair and balanced in my approach. I noted the things that I thought were really good about the program. We have 14 million adolescents in the US living with obesity and 50 care centers that can adequately care for these teens. So the opportunity to have something that was evidence-based, Tom Robinson, an amazing group at Stanford had developed this, I thought was a wonderful thing that we could potentially scale, but there were some like major shortcomings too. Like they had like then and now photos of children, stuff that was just like, ugh, like, no, that's not appropriate. And so after, they were all in the audience, I'm guessing they were hoping I wouldn't like say anything like too bad. I don't know. But Gary Foster, who's the chief science officer, approached me afterwards. And rather than being like annoyed or defensive or anything. He asked me if he could hire me as a consultant. He was like, I totally hear what you're saying. I'd love to hire you as a consultant so you can help us address this, basically. And so that was my first interaction with Weight Watchers. I had, of course I knew about the company, but I didn't, I had not worked with them in any professional capacity. And so that started things off on like a really positive. I really admired that approach of taking feedback really to heart. So I consulted with them for a little bit, and then COVID happened. So a lot of that consulting stuff, because it was like fly to New York and do like a lot of that stuff went on pause. And then October of 2020, I get an email from Gary and he wants to meet. And basically he was like, I want to hire you to come and do this job and to head up clinical research at Weight Watchers. And I was like, can we talk in like a year and a half? Because I'm about to go up for tenure and that would be great. And he was like, you don't need tenure in industry. Like, that's not really going to help you. But I had like such a, like a narrow academic only mindset that like I couldn't imagine not going up for tenure. But I had just finished a graduate certificate in implementation science at University of California, San Francisco, and had done this like NIH implementation science training program. And that was like a real paradigm shift for me in how I was thinking about treatment. And Gary said to me, I'm offering you the opportunity to head up the whole clinical research portfolio that directly informs a program that reaches more than 4 million people across the globe. And once he said that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like I just felt like the opportunity for impact was at a different level that I was currently having, in the interventions that I was doing and the work that I was doing. And so I said yes. And it sounds silly now, but it felt really scary to me. Like academia, I felt like was like a recipe that I knew and I was familiar with, and I knew what to put in that recipe to be successful. And I didn't know what the recipe was for industry. And that was scary. As somebody who like very much likes the gold star, I want the A+ on the paper, like it was scary. But now in my role, I've been there 3 years now. So my day to day, so now I head up clinical research and nutrition for the whole company. So I have a team of 23 people under me, doing internal clinical trials, external clinical trials, pilots, and then leading all the nutrition pieces. So anything that's a nutrition point of view, our food and nutrition databases, anything on that. So the day-to-day is there's lots of balls in the air at all times, but it's really fun. We have 18 different clinical trials going on right now. Have done just as much research, if not more research, since I've gotten in this position. So for me personally, it's been a really wonderful thing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Mitrani, you can go ahead, I'm gonna spotlight you.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you so much for the invitation, Brandon. And wow, the panel is incredible to learn from all of you. I think that the beauty about what we do is, as long as we're excited about the field, it really is what takes and keeps growing from the excitement, from coming back to why am I doing this, right? So as a physician scientist in a field that the field didn't exist. I started working with autologous stem cells. Those are stem cells 15 years ago, where we didn't know that adults had stem cells. We were already implemented in doing this type of research and treatment in South America. I am from Ecuador. So doing something that today, 15 years later, is being done all over the world, because it's an autologous treatment, going from autologous to perinatal derived tissue stem cells, and going from live cells to the secretion of cells, which are called exosomes, have been incredibly interesting. So much that there was not a book to follow, or as Michelle was saying, academia will show us what the steps are and what the time frame is. We just had to invent one. And I've been so fortunate to be able to surround myself with the best of the best in the different fields that I've been in. To after COVID happening, our team, we were a private company, became a public company, and our team of scientists and regulatory team decided that all the job that we were doing, or the research that we were doing directly for COPD, for a long injury model, could be translated for COVID. At the time, the administration said anything and everything that it is a formal, well done job as research for finding a solution for the pandemic accepted, and FDA was able to not only review our application as a new drug investigation, but we were the first company to receive approval for the type of therapeutic drug that we were spearheading. And we went from one approval in 30 days to secure 5 approvals of INDs with FDA, working with also CDC. The type of drug that we develop is, it was a drug that it will be easily mass produced, so we didn't have to rely on the cells, because it's still very, very hard to manage culture expansion of cells. So again, the approach that we took in the company was try to maximize all opportunities that were presented to us. I've been working in the field for all of these years without having a structure of how to follow, I would say. And last year, at the end of last year, the company grew so much, investors came in. We're still going down that path with Organocell, but now the question was, what are my current new position? We have ventured out of the cell environment, and we started working with the genetic diagnostics. I am currently the Chief Scientific Officer of a pre-genetic testing implantation on the embryos that have come from IVF. So we are working now in a diagnostic setting. And again, it's an industry that's very, very young, very, very new. There is a lot of groundbreaking things happening in the industry, and very excited now to take over this position. Currently, this has been 3-4 months where I've taken this job, this opportunity, I would say. I am an entrepreneur at heart. And I've been very fortunate to be able to solve in a day-to-day operations. So I not only run the scientific side, I not only overview and manage the company on so many aspects. As Michelle was saying, there's so many balls in the air every day that we're juggling and handling. But I think the most important thing, as I started saying, is why are you doing it? Why is your passion really driving the force of your work is the most important thing. And if, as I'm saying, the industry didn't exist, we made it happen. There were roads that didn't exist, we just created them. I am very, very hard believer that hard work, and wherever your point of view is coming from, as a woman, as an immigrant, as a woman of color, my voice needed to be heard, and I have no regrets, and I am very, very loud when I have my opinions, because I know there's MDs, there's PhDs here. I have an OMD, I have a certificate of nutrition, and it doesn't matter how much we study, right? What really matters is how we translate that to our community, if that's what you want to do, right? And so I'm here to tell you, it is extremely possible to accomplish whatever you are dreaming of. And if you do it through research and the scientific way, it's the best way to prove along all the naysayers. There are going to be a lot of them, but that is what I'm doing right now.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Rubel, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my current position is a research biologist, and I work within a small USDA research unit at the Arkansas Children's Nutrition Center, which is one of 7 human nutrition centers that are within the US. So I'm a government employee, but my position is very similar to academia. I run my own lab. I have personnel under me. I can mentor postdocs and grad students. So the big thing is probably to tell you a little bit how my position differs from academia. And so the big thing is my salary is fully covered always. I can mentor students just like academia. My main research funding comes from the USDA. And so with that, there are some what I like to call research bumpers. So as the USDA, they come up with like priority areas of research within nutrition. And so sometimes that means I have to kind of veer my research a little bit to fit those priority areas. But otherwise, I can conduct research like an academia lab. The other thing that is different is I'm not, every 5 years, the USDA has a project plan grant cycle. And so you submit a 5-year project plan. And so it gets externally reviewed by others in the field within a different committee, similar to like an NIH grant. And they come back, and when that project is approved, you have funding for those 5 years on that project. So that is the main source of my funding, which means I don't, quote, have to apply to other external grants, but I can. So if there's another project that's within the USDA priorities, I can put in an NIH grant. But I have the flexibility of, compared to academia, if I don't get a grant in every grant cycle, it's totally okay. I still have aspects to do different research. And then similar to academia, there's a promotion review committee that you go through similar to academia. And then my salary though is based on a government pay scale, just different requirements. So otherwise I run my own research program. I have staff under me that helps and conducts my research. I can be adjunct faculty at other universities and collaborate with others. So it's really a position that allows me to do a lot of the stuff like academia that I liked, with a little bit more breathing room because I have a little bit more stability with my salary being covered and not necessarily being in trouble if I don't get an NIH grant. My lab isn't fully funded. So I think your second question was how I got into this position. So I was following the normal academia track, and I really did not find out that the USDA had these research scientist positions until I was applying for jobs within academia, which I got onto the market shortly after COVID, which was a little hard because people were still, limited on how many jobs they were opening up at that period. And so someone actually brought my attention to the fact that the USDA did have these research science position, and it was very similar to academia where I could kind of run my own research program in this sense. And so I went, all USDA jobs are found on US jobs.gov. And so I found and applied this position and got it last July 2022. So
Great. Thank you. Dr. Rubel, I'm going to stick with you just so we have you on the spotlight, and then we'll go back around reverse order how we did. But the next question is, what advice do you have for postdocs and early career trainees that are interested in following a similar path or obtaining a similar position? what would you have recommendations for putting in successful applications, etc.? Just any tips you have, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. So two of them you can connect. So there's different parts of the USDA. Obviously, I have a nutrition and exercise background, so I was more interested in their nutrition centers and getting a research science position in one of those. As I mentioned, there's 7 across the US. But they do offer others. So if you're interested in nutrition, but in an ag model or another aspect, there's research science position within other centers within the USDA. So the first thing to do is, if you're interested in any of the USDA ones, is to get on to jobs.gov. And you can go on there and say you're selected like in a research scientist position. You can limit down in the areas, and you can click it to mark it to let you know when jobs open. Because with the USDA, like a research science position, usually they will come up on usjob.gov, and they're only open for about 2 or 3 weeks. So you have 2 or 3 weeks to put in an application to put it before that position closes. So if you put a little marker on usjobs.gov, it'll give you a like flash email that said, hey, there's this new position at X, Y, and Z. So I would suggest those if you're interested. If you're even starting earlier, like if you're a grad student or you're only like the first year and you're a postdoc, I would almost suggest too, the USDA, like centers like us, have postdoc positions too. And those are a great way to kind of get your feet in and make sure you like, because there's other aspects too. There's a lot more paperwork and other stuff within a government position, and that may not be someone's cup of tea. And so you could get into one of those postdoc positions, and then you would know even sooner, probably in a postdoc position, if a center or a unit is looking for research scientists too. And the last thing is, I wouldn't be afraid to contact. So on all USDA research unit, there's a research leader that's kind of head of the unit. And you can get on the USDA Nutrition Center websites and you can email them and even go, I'm interested in this. Do you know if you're going to have any research scientist positions opening up in the near future? And you can kind of gauge from them if they're going to have positions opened.
Great, thank you. Dr. Mitrani, we're going to circle back to you, and I just want to mention, obviously, all of you have very diverse and different perspectives. Dr. Mitrani, you as an entrepreneur, you can take this question however you please, but
Yeah.
I think as one of the only folks here who have started your own business and operations, you add that perspective as well. So what advice do you have for postdocs and trainees looking to go that route or work in like regenerative medicine, however you want to interpret it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it before. It is, and I think we all have a different way of pursuing our passion, and definitely mine was the entrepreneurship. I am fortunate to have my husband that he runs operations as well, so we've been team players from the beginning. I run the science and the medical part, the marketing as well, because I have the eye for social media for what the brands want to be showing as well, and that those are my strengths. But I don't do any finance or accounting. So I know what my strengths are, and I've made sure to always show that. But my suggestion, it's either if you are applying for a job, and the way that I hire the team that I've been able to successfully create in different companies, it's always, I'm not hiring your CV, even though, yes, you can research 1,000 ways of making your CVs very strong. And yes, education is very important, but I am hiring the human being. So the qualities of a human that you are is what, if I can envision myself working with you 24/7, having a coffee, going to a party, like and whenever a 2 a.m. call from an IVF clinic has biopsied an embryo and we need to run that genetic sample, is like anybody can jump. And I do that is what I culture here in my environment that I have, is that we can all work with incredible human beings. So my 2 cents will be just show up to your job as, you know, with the values of being a great human being, a great team player. I think that goes way more than just what your CV offers. I encourage a lot of doing shadowing, and you know, if you are thinking of specific positions, just reach out to them and say, hey, is there any way that I can come and shadow for a week, for a day, for I've found that has helped team members of mine that didn't know what position they were looking for. Now, one of them is finishing med school, and the other one is running a full laboratory operations, just from seeing how much you can do. There's things that if you're not looking what's out there, you would never look, right? It's just what they teach us in academia, right? Of those positions to fulfill, there's so much more that can be done. So yeah, look out of the box would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Dr. Cordell, I'm gonna shift things to you. Let me
Yeah.
remove.
I mean, I think a lot of great things have been discussed already. You know, something Mari mentioned is like the importance of being able to work with others. You know, in academia, we talk a lot about like collaboration, like interdisciplinary collaboration, but you're still usually working like nutrition scientists with like exercise physiologists, and maybe if you get crazy, you're like working with an anthropologist or something like that, but you're still all able to use like science speak and really like understand what you're talking about. And when you're working in an industry position, you like every day you're talking to the product team, the marketing team, the legal team, the social media team. Like you're talking to a lot of people who are not trained in science. And so being able to communicate in a way that makes the science compelling, it's compelling and easy to understand, and you know, also very important, that very collaborative, et cetera. Because, you know, at the end of the day, people want to work with people that they like, that they respect, that they, you know, feel comfortable with, et cetera. So the communication piece is, I think, really important. And that's true whether you go into industry or stay in academia. At the end of the day, you know, having written communication skills, excellent oral communication skills, is going to benefit you. And it's interesting, I do see a difference in what's accepted in industry versus what is accepted in academia. In academia, you can kind of like not act like a great person, and you can be really toxic. And as long as you're bringing in grants, most, at least from what I've seen, maybe you guys have had different experiences, but if you're bringing in money, you can get away with a lot of bad behavior. An industry that is not tolerated, like at all. So I think in general, people should always be kind, but it's extra emphasized in industry, and I do wish it was a bit more emphasized in academia. Integrity, it's pretty important.
Thank you, Dr. Cordell. Dr. Bond, you're up next.
All right. Yeah, so I would touch on something that I think is really important, and I kind of answered it in my first question, is that having a strong network, whether you're in industry or academia, will get you so far. Like Dr. Mitrani said, she's not looking for someone's CV. She wants to know what kind of person they are. I would echo the same thing for industry. You can have the strongest resume, but if you don't know or if you don't know people in industry or government who can vouch for you, who know like the type of work you do, the kind of person you are, it makes it much more difficult to get an industry job. And so I would say, using myself as an example, my first job hunt, I was very naive. I didn't actually start networking until after I got my PhD. And that was a huge mistake because then it took me about 4 to 5 months to even start getting interviews. And so that made it very difficult because I didn't know anyone, as opposed to after I got my first job and started networking more intentionally. It was very easy to get that second job because I already knew people who worked at General Mills. And, I had to pull up one of my slides that I presented before. At one point, I had 5 recruiters in my LinkedIn inbox asking me if I wanted to apply for that job, and they were all nutrition based. And that just is an example of how my strong network was able to get me these opportunities. And so this is not a sponsored ad for LinkedIn, but I do think it is very important for all young researchers to build out your network, to use LinkedIn to connect with people, because that is really the best place to network. And then the second one would be at like academic events. So in my experience, when I go to an academic conference, very rarely do I go to the science presentations because you can read study when it comes out. I could talk to someone one-on-one about their presentation, but I find that time to be most valuable for making connections because I don't know the next time I will meet someone that I've been wanting to meet. And I do go out of my way to go up to a person and shake their hand and say, hey, I know about you. Like, could we connect on LinkedIn? So my recommendation for young trainees is to go ahead and do the same thing. First off, I commend you for all being a part of this webinar, because this is the first step to landing your next job, exploring other careers. If you don't know anything about industry, how would you know unless you talk to more people who worked in industry, right? Entrepreneurs, people who work in government. Go ahead and make cold emails to people, reach out to them and say, I'm interested in like learning more about this type of career. Can you help me out? And I'm not going to paint a pretty picture and say that everyone will respond back to you, because in my experience, the response rate was like 20%, but you really appreciate the people who do help you out. And so knowing how lost I felt in my first job hunt, whenever a student or young researcher reaches out to me and wants to learn more about industry, I do set up time with them one-on-one and give them as much time to share my thoughts as much as possible. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you so much. And just to piggyback on that, all the panelists here today, you didn't say no. So thank you thank you for saying yes to my cold email about joining this panel and taking time out of your busy day. Thank you again, Dr. Bond. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up to the audience. Anyone can feel free to jump in. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. You can throw a question in the chat, whatever you prefer. We have about 20 minutes with our panelists, so please use this time to ask any burning questions that you may have.
So I have a question for any of the panelists. In moving from like a really traditional academia position to an industry or government or an entrepreneurial position, were there things that you felt that you were unprepared for in academia that like we could work on now?
I'm going to take this one. You are unprepared for a gazillion things. And this is something I always touch on. And society has built us to fear failure. And let me tell you today, you can only achieve better things if you fail, not one, but a lot of times. And so if one thing you take today is you're unprepared for a lot of things, but until you get to that moment and you're like, holy shit, how do I figure this out? And believe me, fall as many times, because the next time you stand up and you're like, oh, I know how to do this. And unfortunately, even everybody that's here so qualified, we still don't know a lot of things. So know that in anything in life, not only this, but once you become a mom, right? Like things like that. You are unprepared most of the times, and it just what I've learned to do is have my face straight up and say, okay, I might not have an answer right now, but I'll get back. And then consult with my team leaders that might have that answer. I reach out by email to other people. And then eventually, if you really don't have an answer to that, you just straight up say, I can't help, right? But try.
Yeah, I agree completely, Mari. The amount of like the learning curve was steep for me when I came into industry. Like there was all these acronyms that I didn't know, like people would do, like people just did things in a really different way. So that was really scary. But one thing you all asked about, like, what can you do now? And I just want to build on Taylor's point of like the importance of networking. Like I'm like +1 on everything that Taylor said. And I think in academia, you know, networking is really important, but we're not necessarily like taught how to do that. You know, what does that look like? We're told you should network, and then we go to conferences and they have networking sessions, but then normally we like end up talking to the people we already know at those events. And so, you know, I think it's a skill and it's like a muscle that you should develop and like putting yourself out there. Because whether you want to stay in academia or industry or go to government, whatever, like networking is going to benefit you significantly. So I know it's scary. Like I always had my PhD students, like at the holiday, like party, I'd be like, okay, you have to go talk to the department chair. And they like, look at, you know, like look at me like deer in headlights, like, please, please, anything but that. But it's a really important skill, regardless of what path you take.
Yeah, and just to give everyone some confidence, it's when people are hired for positions, especially when you go right from academia, your experience matters, but it's not everything that matters. They hire you based on your potential. And so that could be things like your attitude, ability to learn quickly. Like Michelle said, I knew nothing about business or talking to lawyers. And that's not something academia is supposed to train you for, but companies understand that. And so it is part of your career development to learn those things as you go. So don't fear that, hey, I've never worked with a marketer before. How do I know how to like, substantiate a claim or get a claim on pack for them? Uh, those are things you learn. So Dr. Mitriani said it as well. It's like, don't be afraid to not know everything, to put yourself in uncomfortable positions. I remember I had to stand and give like a 2-minute talk, not a talk, an intro for ASN. And I was so nervous, but I was like, I have to force myself to do this. So yeah, I would just say, don't like shoot yourself down as long as you have like a can-do attitude and yeah, I would just say that's really all that matters. So that's what I'll say about that.
Okay, so I echo a lot of that. The only other thing I would say, especially within government position, is realize that most of these industry and government do team science and not its own. So in my position, yes, I have my own program, but I work within a unit. So our unit actually does a lot of team research together. So working and utilizing each other's studies. And I think sometimes academia can get very independent, like people stay in their lanes that kind of collaborate. But really, when you get outside of it, it's a lot more team-based science. You've got to learn to work with others if that comes to how to communicate and figure out how to have those conversations with collaborating better. Those are way more beneficial skills if you go into government industry.
Thank you. We have a message in the chat from Dustin, and I know this applies. We have a couple of graduate students in the audience as well. If I'm unable to complete postdoc training, is that going to affect my ability to be qualified for these positions? If yes, how do I further my research skills without postdoc training? Taylor, do you want to take this first stab at this one?
Yeah, so I'm very opinionated in this regard. So take my opinion as it is. you do not need a postdoc to get an industry position. And I would go as far to say that a postdoc would probably hurt you if the skills that you are building in that postdoc experience are not relevant to industry. So, for example, a lot of industry work is based on clinical studies because we don't use animal or cell culture evidence for substantiation. I would say any type of postdoc work in cell culture or animal-based studies, I would say that's not going to help with an industry job. And so I would say, you can apply and you should apply to industry positions, knowing that having postdoc experience is not essential. And that's my very strong opinion. I would say even my graduate work, which was all based in animal evidence, I don't use any of those hard skills like or technical expertise in those areas anymore because it is so heavily focused on clinical research and probably like epidemiology is the other big area.
I'm gonna, yes, 100%. I also have a strong position on that side that you don't need to have that stamp. It is what you are willing to do to take that job. So if the question is, how do I further my research skills without postdoc? I mean, I think that the skills that you should be focusing on is what is exactly what you like to do, even if you don't have that certificate, right? What would you do if you do have that one? Like, what is the specific part of the research that you want to develop? Link up with people like that are doing it, shadow those people, start doing research with those people, and therefore you're already doing that training. So I agree 100% with you, Taylor. Don't need to have that to successfully launch your career or further your career. I think practice is what makes us so much better than what my degrees are.
So I'm going to ask a related question kind of on the other side of that coin. I hear what you're both saying, and there have been some articles in Nature and Science that say, don't do a postdoc if you want to go to industry, or the longer that you're in academia, the harder it is to transition. I think the majority of us on this Zoom are postdocs in academia that might be considering industry. So what is kind of, I feel like I have gained experience and skills that are beneficial in a postdoc. But do you have any advice on how to market those effectively to people who maybe are coming to the conversation with the thought that it's unnecessary or it's not really going to further you as a candidate?
Yeah, I think what people care about in industry, it's less about like what degree you've achieved or what milestone, quote unquote, you've hit like a postdoc. It's more about what skill set you bring. And I think just focusing on what skills that you have, like you, Kelly, I did a postdoc and I feel like I got incredible training in my postdoc. I got to work with Susan on the call, and I got to work with Jim Hill, and I got to work with John Peters. And I learned really great things during that time that I use a lot in my industry position. So I think it's less about, what have you done and when, and more just like what skills do you have, how does it complement and inform like the role that you're interested in.
Yeah, and I guess what I'll also add there is, going back to networking, I'll use General Mills as an example. We went through 2 hiring rounds for the last senior scientist position that opened up, and 5 of the 6 candidates who went for the final round of the interview had a direct referral, versus only 1 person stood out purely based on their resume, which has their experience and their skills. So I would just say, like, if Kelly, if you're looking for jobs right now, go ahead and just make those connections. Like, there's nothing holding you back from doing those things. And it's really those connections that you build with people and jobs that you want or companies that you want that will help you get that next position. I wouldn't be so like focused on, what you don't have, or like trying to like explain all your skills like on a LinkedIn job description or something like that. So yeah, I would just go ahead and make the meaningful connections.
Thank you.
Just to add that, I think we're here because of our networking capacities that we've learned to develop. And as Taylor was saying, for industry, I think your LinkedIn profile has to be strong. And just it's as simple as just follow those people and follow back. You can send messages through there and say, hey, I'm looking for this and that. And you never know when those people will come around that are looking at what you're doing, and so on. I can tell you something else besides just LinkedIn, which is more like the formal social media, but Instagram and TikTok have become, yes, a source of a lot of bad things, but for me, I've allowed myself to network only with valuable physicians in fields that I am interested in, and it's incredible the network that I've been able to accomplish on Instagram. I'm telling you about my example. When I transitioned from stem cells to genes, I didn't know anybody. My network entirely has been, yes, female physicians, entrepreneurs, but I didn't know anybody about genes. And just one connection I made with a very strong embryologist, I was able to connect in a industry congress, and she brought in right now my leadership team for embryologists. I didn't know these people, but it was that networking ability that I've explored in my. I know that not everybody is into Instagram and or TikTok or whatever it is, but find your social media that you can connect, and start building again the network, because you never know when you're going to meet these people, and just a hello will be in one of the congresses can really make a big difference for you and for their companies.
I will also just add to the first question. So for government positions, technically for my position, you could go in with just a PhD, but it is one position where a postdoc helped you at least for a year or so, because one of the main things I had to show is I had a vision that I had a line of research that I was interested in that could complement the research unit, but was also my own vision of how I was going to run my program. And so having a postdoc training really helped, but you can also go into these research positions with just a PhD. But you need to make sure you have a clear line of what kind of future research you want to do and how it complements what the USDA is doing and what that unit that you're applying for.
I have a quick question. Can we ask questions? Yeah, okay. So I actually came to academia from industry. I worked at Pepsi before I did my PhD, which is a little bizarre, but over the past 3 years as a postdoc, I've been sort of like keeping my ear to the ground about industry jobs. And I think something that I get a little, or government, lots of different things, but what I get a little intimidated by is as I start to like build sort of my own funding here, which, that's generous, but as I do, I get a little anxious or nervous about potentially leaving, and then how you like transition off all of that work, because often for some of these jobs the turnaround is quick. You don't have like 3 months to close things out. You maybe need to like transition more quickly. And so for those of you who maybe had faced that issue when transitioning, if you have any advice or could touch on how you handled that type of navigating that.
Michelle, do you want to take this one? Because I know you're like in a unique position where you still have some affiliations with your previous academic role.
Yeah, so is the question really about like you feel unsure about if you go, or can you clarify a little bit?
Sure, yeah, sorry. I guess I mean like, say you're managing a few grants already that have a longer timeline than like maybe the timeline to switch to a new job, like in your scenario where it came, you weren't necessarily expecting it, but
Right.
you all have commitments at your university, but then you're also considering leaving. So sort of how you navigate that. And it sounds like there might be some flexibility, or at least that's what you experienced, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was able to have that flexibility. I had to the grant I had in hand when I took the job was a K, and you have to dedicate 75% of your time to the grant, and I didn't think I could really do that realistically. I know people who have switched over to industry and kept their Ks. I don't know how they did that. When I got my RO1, I switched over the PI to a different person because I did not feel like I could carry out the PI role in the way that it deserves to be carried out, given all my other responsibilities. So I think, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen in life. And I'm a big believer in like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think, keep going after those grants. If you get the grant, great. If you get an industry position, you have to leave the grant, then there are more than enough colleagues that are very happy to take over your RO1.
Yeah.
I agree there 100%. From the point of view of being a woman and our carrying a motherly instinct, I know exactly where that's coming from. But as Michelle said, there's a lot of people that will carry on what you've already accomplished. So carry on with making your life where you want to see your life being fulfilled as a professional, because those will keep moving.
Yeah, I'll also add that you only have one life to live, and so do what makes you happy. You
Yes.
shouldn't feel like you are
We'll be
responsible.
clapping here.
Yeah. It's best to work out with your advisor, and maybe the new company that you go to will give you flexibility to transition things off. But for example, in industry, if you were to join another competitor and you told your manager that you were joining a different company, they would have you pack up your things on the spot. You wouldn't even have time to transition anything off. So just know that when I left my first job, it was going from supplements to food, so it's not even the same industry, but they pretty much wanted me to say like, hey, just finish up what you're doing. I was gone within like 2 weeks. So in industry, it's standard for you to just drop everything and go. Obviously, you want to maintain relationships with your advisor, but don't let that be the thing that holds you back because you're afraid that someone else has to deal with the responsibility. You shouldn't put that burden on yourself, and do what makes you happy.
Yeah, could not agree with that
100%.
more. Yes, like that is absolute like pearls of wisdom right there. One thing I heard was do not go looking for love at your institution. And what I take that to mean is like your institution, it doesn't matter where you are. It's not what have you done for me, it's what have you done for me lately. And they do not have loyalty towards you at all. I am a very loyal person. That is just like part of my personality. And it has burned me so many times. And I just think Taylor said it perfectly. It's really important to prioritize your health, your well-being, your life, your family, like whatever it is that your values are, make sure you're prioritizing that because they will throw you out like yesterday's trash if it benefits them.
Wow. And I'm just gonna share, I mean, building my company from a private to a public company and bringing investors in that had the ability to grow a project in a different way, that I've been building my baby because I considered my job as, and every single thing as my baby. And I had him like that. And it was one of the hardest heartbreaks, the breakups that I had to deal with when I understood that my my job really didn't value me anymore the way that I poured everything into it. And as Michelle was saying, I got to a point where I realized I didn't spend time with my daughter just because I was dedicating my life to that job, that today that job doesn't even see me as valuable anymore. So guess what? I'll open another door, my own door, and go to another industry. And here I am. And like, so as Michelle said, I think that is the most important thing. Just keep going and looking for what makes you happy. And I'm going to end up with, what is your why? What makes you happy? What are you making a difference in your community?
I'll just make a quick note as far as government positions, to your question, Catherine. If your research aligns to what your national program research priority is, then you could continue that. There's a few pieces of my postdoc work that I have continued here in my new position. The biggest thing is if you had an NIH grant as a government employee, my salary is fully covered. So on an NIH grant, I cannot have any of my salary coming from NIH. So if I had brought in one of those grants, then it would have to switch that my salary was no longer covered by another entity.
Thank you, everyone. I know we're over time. Really appreciate all the panelists' time for being here today. I did disseminate a flyer and presentation with their contact information if anyone wants to reach out. Thanks everyone for showing up today. And again, thank you, panelists. Really appreciate it. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.